Paddy Crumlin is the National Secretary of the Maritime Union of Australia. Good morning to you.
Hello, mate.
Paddy Crumlin, you just heard Scott Barklam say there that these are people who are working outside migration zones, that this is what happens internationally, that this decision of last night is going to have a disastrous impact on the oil and gas sector.
Arrant nonsense and also misleading. We're not talking about Siberia here. This is Australian territory. The migration zone was put in place after the Tampa so that refugees couldn't be landed on Christmas Island. It's Australian territory. It's Australian hydrocarbon owned by the Australian people and leased to Chevron and the others. This is Australian territory and should come under the laws of Australia. Somehow Scott seems to think he can wave a magic wand and put it in the middle of the Arabian desert.
So what do you make of that?
Australia we're talking about.
What do you make of that decision last night? You obviously support it. Why?
Well, what they did, they brought in a new visa, and again Scott's misleading in what he said, and poor old Senator Cash was battling with it. There were three visas. We're okay with the 457 visa. All of those workers out there are on 457s that Scott refers to. We're happy for them to stay as long as there's a market test. If there aren't any Australians that can do those high-level professional jobs, and there's proper testing of that, then of course the jobs have to continue. The work has to continue. There's been no problem. We're supportive of those people staying as long as there aren't any Australians that can fill the gap.
Okay, and how concerned then are you of this belief that those workers were being exploited, that they weren't being paid the same wages and conditions as Australian employees?
Because the proposal had a new visa called a maritime crew visa that would bring in third world seafarers, semi-skilled, no taxation, no regulation, no safety, no Fair Work Act. That was the piece. That's the jigsaw puzzle. And what they did, they wrapped it all up together and said, oh, look, the MUA, the big bad MUA. And it's not the MUA, it's all of the unions, all of the workers out there were part of the lobbying, on this issue. And they're saying, it was a bit like that Richard Pryor movie where he puts a gun to his head and said, don't move or the black fella gets it. They went out and created a crisis of their own doing, and it's quite easy to fix. All they've got to do is take the offensive visa away and continue with the 457s and what has traditionally serviced the industry. But Scott didn't say that.
No, what he has said, he cited a specialist offshore construction vessel saying 150 Australian workers may have to be stood down because 70 non-Australians critical to operating and navigating the ship can no longer legally do their jobs. Will that happen?
No. We're happy for them to resubmit the regulation with the 457s, have those workers stay out there. Now, if there are Australians that can do the job, well, then that's fine. That's what it's about. They're filling a gap where those competencies don't exist in the country. They created this crisis under the advice of Australian Mines and Metals, and that they're standing over the situation for no other reason to avoid Australian regulation in Australian territory. That's the bottom line, mate.
Paddy Crumlin is from the Maritime Union of Australia. So, to what extent then, as we talk about what matters most to you, to what extent is your argument based on concern that foreign workers are being exploited, or a more significant and long-term concern that if the visa system had been allowed to stay, that maybe more and more of those foreign workers could be doing the jobs you say your members might?
Well, that part of the visa that is offensive was designed to do that. It didn't exist previously. Scott's right to this extent. There was a visa called a maritime crew visa, but it was only for international ships transiting Australian territory. It lasted for 5 days. They went away in their genius, redesigned it, made it open-ended, and then created a situation where foreign unskilled, semi-skilled workers could come in, replace Australians currently working there, and get paid and not have the protections that the Australian regulation, labour regulation, safety regulation. They created a crisis. It's been of their own doing. They could submit that regulation in 5 minutes with the 457 visas, all the protections of those international workers at the top end, and we will agree with it and support it. And they won't. And this is, it's Chicken Little. Well, the sky's falling in. The sky's not going to fall in. We support them. Put the regulation back the way it should be, protective both of the job and workers can continue to come in on visas and fill that gap in skills. We've got no problems with that.
Paddy Crumlin, thank you.
Shut up.
Paddy Crumlin, thank you. He's the National Secretary